ABC 10 News at 5 starts now.
Is that a bomb? Oh my God!
Lebanon's capital rocked by a massive explosion. Dramatic videos from around the city capturing that blast and the devastation. Good evening, I'm Lindsay Pena.
And I'm Steve Atkinson. This is just one of several videos posted to social media today. It shows a huge cloud of smoke and some flames, followed by this, a large explosion that just leveled buildings near the city's port. The camera then goes down with the person behind it running for cover. It is 3 o'clock in the morning right now in Beirut, and here is the very latest. More than 70 people are dead. That number is expected to rise, and more than 3,000 others are hurt. The blast was so powerful, it was felt 100 miles away and created seismic waves equivalent of a magnitude 3.3 earthquake. The cause is still under investigation, but initial reports point to a fireworks storage facility. That fire then ignited 2,700 tons of ammonium nitrate.
The pain also being felt here as San Diegans race to contact loved ones. And as ABC 10 News reporter Michael Chen tells us, a former San Diegan is recounting the terrifying moments of that blast.
Oh my God!
Before this apocalyptic scene, it was a quiet night for Elise Shamaz and his family inside their 6-story Beirut apartment. It all began just after 6 p.m. and it felt like an earthquake.
In San Diego, the earthquakes are more like a rolling shake, but here it was a jittery shake.
Shamaz, who taught at SDSU a decade ago, says all of his locked windows swung open.
The whole house was moving, and after a second, we felt the shockwave. It was like a big explosion hitting you.
Shamaz raced downstairs and snapped this photo of a huge smoke plume. The blast site at the port just 3 miles away from his home. For miles from that site where explosive materials were stored, according to Lebanese officials, a scene of utter destruction. Shamaz says he can't help but recall Lebanon's bloody civil war.
I lived here in Lebanon through the war, and we were used to shellings and bombs and explosions. This was like nothing that I've ever experienced before.
Across the world in San Diego, news of the blast hitting the Lebanese community hard.
When you see it for a minute, you can't believe it's happening.
Restaurant owner Nabi Jaha immediately called his niece and a cousin, who both live about 4 miles from the blast site. Both are okay, but shaken. Jaha's anxiety over his family still lingers. He has several cousins who work near the blast site.
That some cars were lifted from one side of the street and thrown to the other side.
Jaha's anxiety over his family still lingers. He has several cousins who work near the blast site.
But I haven't been able to talk to them. You worry. What can you say?
Michael Chen, ABC 10 News.
In just the last 90 minutes, President Trump weighed in on the events in Lebanon, suggesting it was the result of an attack.
Based on the explosion, I've met with some of our great generals, and they just seemed to feel that this was not some kind of a manufacturing explosion type of event. This was seems to be, according to them, they would know better than I would, but they seem to think it was a attack.
Again, right now, the Prime Minister only indicating tons of stored ammonium nitrate caused the blast. How that happened is under investigation. You can follow any developments by downloading our free mobile app. Just go to the App Store and search 10 News.
Now to the latest on the coronavirus cases here in San Diego County. Today, we finally got the promised plan to crack down on local businesses violating the county's public health order. ABC 10 News reporter Mimi Alcala shows us what the county's safe reopening compliance team will be looking for.
Chairman Cox, that motion passes unanimously with all board members being present and voting aye.
After a bit of a lengthy back and forth, the County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to up enforcement efforts by cracking down on businesses or entities knowingly violating the public health order. Currently, the county's newly developed Safe Reopening Compliance Team is focusing on egregious cases, outbreaks, and complaints. There are only 10 staff members. 13 more will be added on to expand on those efforts. A Healthy Compliance Hotline has also gone live, where members of the public can report violations. Tuesday's vote will now add an additional 22 staff members at $1.8 million to look into the businesses or entities that are still operating in violation of the public health order. Funding would come from the CARES Act. Dr. Wilma Wooten, the county's public health officer, has already sent a number of letters ordering businesses to close down until they are in compliance. That included a handful of gyms and churches that stayed open inside when they were ordered to close or move operations outdoors. And for the first time, the district attorney's office filed 5 misdemeanor charges against Jim and Ramona for failing to comply with the public health order. But the owner says he plans on fighting back.
It's not really about me anymore. It's about all small businesses. And I feel it's my duty to stand up.
The county's team will attempt to educate businesses first, but if that doesn't work, it'll then move to enforcement. Mimi Alcala, ABC 10 News.
2 other enforcement options were on the table for supervisors to consider, but they were voted down by the majority. The hotline to report businesses in violation of the health order just went live. That number is 858-694-2900. And a lifeline extended for businesses closed by the pandemic. Today, the San Diego City Council unanimously approved an emergency order allowing restaurants to keep operating outside for a year and greenlighting other businesses to do the same. But our ABC 10 News anchor Vanessa Van Hefty spoke with a business owner who says the order won't help her.
The San Diego City Council extended what has been a lifeline for restaurants to operate outside. Now other businesses like salons were given the green light to do the same. But Mission Valley salon owner Charlotte Delgado says it won't work.
It's devastating. We've gone from being a productive, busy, full-time stylist duo to nothing.
While it may be an option for some salons, it's not for hers.
It's not something that you want to experience outside. Coming into a salon is an experience, and being with your stylist is an experience. It was 90 degrees today.
She operates in a single suite salon and is pleading with the county to work inside with safety protocols.
I pay taxes. I'm not asking for a handout. I'm asking for a job, my job back.
For months, she's applied for every grant imaginable to help put food on the table.
I have gotten nothing. I've gotten no help.
Under the new order, hair and nail salons, massage establishments, churches, and gyms can all operate on private lots and streets. CrossFit Unsung has managed and says it's a matter of survival.
Being closed for 3 months already this year, being outdoors is pretty much the only thing that's going to allow us and a lot of other businesses to make it through all this.
The city today also announcing grants for small businesses in underserved communities. The city reallocating $700,000 from its Small Business Relief Fund, each grant ranging from $1,000 to $5,000. But for the Delgados, it still won't be enough.
Help me survive as a small business owner, as a salon stylist. Help me.
Vanessa Van Hefty, ABC 10 News.
To be eligible for that grant, you must be self-employed with fewer than 10 employees and making less than $100,000. You also need documentation that your business has seen a decline in revenue because of the pandemic. For more information on how to apply, we have that information on 10news.com.
Well, children at a private school in El Cajon are scheduled to be back in the classroom in September. Parents of children at Foothills Christian Middle School got a letter, which came as a surprise to some. The letter says the school has a 5-step plan. It includes weekly health screenings for COVID-19, temperature checks, hand hygiene, increased sanitation, and optional face masks. Parents and students must sign the letter agreeing to the terms in order to return to school. New guidelines from the state would let some elementary schools apply for a waiver to reopen for in-person learning. ABC 10 News anchor Mary McKenzie explains the rules and the concerns already being raised about allowing some schools to let kids back to class.
Some California elementary schools could reopen for in-person learning if they meet new guidelines to apply for a waiver. The guidance was released Monday night from the California Department of Public Health. It's only for grades K through 6 because distance learning is arguably harder for younger kids. Already there are concerns about safety and equity. Small private and parochial schools would be the most likely to meet the detailed guidelines due to greater flexibility to limit enrollment, for instance, and more resources to implement stricter safety protocols.
The gap is going to grow.
Susan Scala is the president of Chula Vista Educators, which represents teachers in the largest K through 6 school district in the state. On Monday, they held a motor march to call for a better plan for schools to reopen. She says with high rates of infection in much of the South Bay already, there's little chance that any schools in that area would qualify for waivers. The guidelines discourage them from being granted in areas where the infection rate is more than twice the threshold for being placed on the state's monitoring list. But even if they could, it's unlikely public schools would meet the other guidelines. To apply for waivers, schools have to submit plans at least 2 weeks in advance of when they want to reopen. with protocols including plans for testing and how they would handle outbreaks and closures. District approval will be required, and they'll have to talk with teachers' unions, but may not require them to sign off because staff and faculty at many private schools are non-union. It adds up to a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots, says Scala.
Because there's inequity and unfairness in education, public education right now. And with the forces that are trying to dismantle public education, it's only going to make it worse.
Mary McKenzie, ABC 10 News.
And parents across the country, they are worrying if it's safe to send their children back to the classroom while the death toll rises now in 35 states. As ABC's Andrew Dimber reports, the president is now coming under fire for stating that the virus is under control.
The White House offering a confusing characterization on the state of the coronavirus. President Trump claiming the virus is under control in an interview with Axios on HBO, despite the U.S. having around a quarter of the world's infections and deaths.
The United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world.
Lower than the world?
Lower than Europe.
In what?
New data shows daily COVID cases have dropped below 50,000 for the first time since the 4th of July, but according to an internal FEMA memo obtained by ABC News, deaths are up 24% from a week ago. Dr. Deborah Birx cautioning governors in some of the hardest hit states, deaths could keep rising.
We do see a continuous probably rise in mortality over the next 2 weeks.
School districts around the country have been looking to the Trump administration for guidance on safely getting kids back in the classroom, but there is no specific national plan in place.
I'm sweating under this. I don't know how a 5-year-old is going to be able to handle it.
A teacher from Lake County, Florida, taking matters into her own hands, rigging her classroom with plastic dividers. In Arizona, teachers circling the state capitol in cars, protesting the state's school reopening plans.
How do we keep them 6 feet apart? And how do we keep them safe from each other?
All throughout the pandemic, the focus on finding a vaccine has been paramount in reversing these troubling trends. Developers Moderna and Pfizer entered phase 3 of trials late last month.
These clinical trials have moved forward at record speed.
But experts caution that even with the advent of a vaccine in the future, right now, social distancing and wearing masks are the best ways to keep safe. Not everyone is listening. In Beverly Hills, this party, part of the problem. Authorities in New York City shut down a party boat with over 170 guests, while in New Jersey, a plea from the governor to get serious.
Consider this as being put on notice. We will not tolerate these devil-may-care, nonchalant attitudes any longer.
And there are other areas where Americans are hurting from the coronavirus, like financially. On Capitol Hill, there's still deadlock on a deal for the next coronavirus stimulus package. No telling when lawmakers may come to an agreement. Andrew Dimber, ABC News, Washington.
The military has found the remains of the 8 service members killed after an amphibious assault vehicle sank last week. The service members, they were from Camp Pendleton. The Navy used an undersea search and rescue ship to locate the remains and the wreckage. Last Thursday, that vessel began taking on water and sank during a training exercise off San Clemente Island. The service members were identified this weekend, and they range in age from 18 to 23.
It might be hard to believe, but we're now just 90 days away from the November election. With the pandemic showing no signs of slowing down, the country is preparing to vote mostly by mail. We spoke to the San Diego County Registrar of Voters to find out how prepared we are and what safeguards are in place to prevent fraud. Despite what President Trump has said about voting by mail,
Mail-in ballots, be careful, be careful.
San Diego County election officials say we're prepared to conduct a secure, accurate election.
From our perspective, we've had years of times to refine process, both outbound of giving individuals their mail ballots, as well as the inbound process when we receive their voted ballots.
Registrar of Voters Michael Vu tells 10 News a majority of people in our county were already getting mail-in ballots, so their office is poised to handle issuing ballots to the remaining voters.
75% of the 1.8 million registered voters that we have in our county are already permanently getting their ballots by mail.
For the November election, every registered California voter will automatically receive a mail-in ballot. Those ballots, instructions, and an I voted sticker will start going out on October 5th. Before you return your ballot, you're required to sign it. That signature is then used to verify your vote.
This is when these mail ballots are coming back to our office. We signature verify every single one of them against the signature on the registration rolls.
Vu says in addition to matching up those signatures, there are also measures in place to make sure the registration rolls are accurate.
Our office is constantly verifying and getting information from various government sources as to the status of voters that are out there.
If you need to vote in person, there will be polling places open for 4 days, beginning October 31st. But there will be fewer locations, so it's best to check your sample ballot or look it up online. If you still need to register to vote or have more questions about the process, there's a link to the county's website on our page, 10news.com.